Hey, everybody. Welcome to another week of the Stat Connect. We had a great time telling you all about the stats that we were expecting and hoping to see in the Florida-Utah game last week. And we are looking forward to another game with a big-time opponent here in Baylor for the Utes to play. And I'm going to give you some more stats, talk some more about what we're doing. I think I'm going to start off the conversation today. I was really watching the Florida game closely and taking note of a lot of the stats that came out with all of that, and then turn it over to Matt, whose analysis really focuses on the Baylor game. So to start with Florida, I got to say, when I was watching that game, I texted Matt. I was like, man, the Utes look really good. This is a very impressive early start. Certainly the final score, especially when you consider how that last touchdown was pretty late for the Gators. Final score looked really good. Felt good. I think everybody in the stands walked out of that stadium feeling really excited and really optimistic about the Utes' chances throughout the rest of the year. When I started to dig into the stats a little bit more, I would say that I was maybe less enthusiastic about how the Utes performed. Overall, they scored really well, but when I started to look at the most important number, kind of the first number I look at is yards per play differential, right? So how efficient one team is versus the other team. If a team is getting 10 yards a play on average, but their opponent is getting 11 yards per play, even though 10 yards per play is great, that's still not a position that the team wants to be in. Well, the Utes, they got 5.09 yards per play against the Gators, which is really not a lot. In fact, it's good for 91st in the nation, and actually less than the Gators got. The Gators had a slightly more efficient offense than the Utes did over the course of the game on average. Now, of course, there's a lot of garbage time. There's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts having to do with that. But broadly speaking, you want that number to be a lot higher. And this was despite that great 70-yard touchdown pass to open up the game, this was a pretty lackluster performance for the Utes overall. The other thing that I look at when I look at games, this was a big factor in the Florida game, is what I call high leverage plays. So these are plays that are make or break for a team, where they are in a position where they are either likely to not score very many points based on their field position down and distance, or they're likely to score a lot of points based on their field position down and distance. And then something happens to totally blow that up. So great example in this game would be that very first play of the game. The average points scored on 1st and 10 from the 30-yard line is about 1.5. So you score a touchdown, every 4 drives or so when you start there on average. But the Utes got 7 on that play. So that's a huge swing in expected points for the Utes, a big advantage to have. Another example kind of going the other way is you have Florida. They're in a similar field position. I think it was 3rd and 9 on the 11, throw a pass that gets picked off, and suddenly the Utes are inches away from a touchdown. That wound up being about a 6-point swing. So one thing I look for in a game when I'm trying to decide how dominant was this performance is, did all of those high leverage plays fall, or almost all those high leverage plays fall on the side of one team or the other? If you see that, you want to take a little bit off of that score differential. And that's exactly what we saw in the Florida-Utah game. I counted 9 high leverage plays, 3 for the Utes. One was that 70-yard pass I talked about, another missed field goal, and then a made field goal. Field goals, very high leverage plays, because you either miss them or you make them. A lot of points at stake on a field goal play. And then I counted 8 high leverage plays for Florida. The Utes came out ahead on 6-7 of those 11. That's more than 50%, about 60% of those high leverage plays, to a grand total of 5.85 extra points for the Utes on their winning high leverage plays, and Florida lost 4.11 points on theirs. That's almost a 10-point swing, just based on these sort of high, I don't want to say randomness or luck, because the Utes earned all of the results on those plays. Money Parks runs a great route. Bryson Barnes throws a great pass. That is why that play wound up being a touchdown. But that same kind of play could also have just as easily as happened when the Utes were 3 yards from the goal line. From my statistical perspective, where you sort of jumble all the plays up and you reassign them in a random order, that huge play just happened to come at the perfect moment for the Utes to add a lot of points. When you get all that, 10 points, not a great performance from an efficiency perspective. About 10 points of these high leverage plays that the Utes were able to take advantage of, and also a really high havoc rate. The Utes had a sack, a pass breakup, an interception, or a forced fumble on 20% of Florida's offensive downs. That's a lot. That's going to be probably a nation leading havoc rate. It's probably not something the Utes are going to be able to sustain week to week as good as we expect their defense to be. All of those things together tell me that this is a team that had a better scoring margin than you might have expected, given the performance of the team, sort of on average, play to play. Overall, it didn't really cause me to adjust my priors very much for the Utes. I think it's an offense that may struggle here and there to make progress, and a defense that is going to be really, really dominant throughout the season. Pretty much exactly what I saw. I think, on the other hand, watching the Baylor game, there was a big difference from what maybe a lot of folks were expecting from Baylor. But Matt, I think you did spent a little bit more time with Baylor, so I'll hand it over to you to talk about that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I was thinking about, I think Kyle Whittingham even alluded to it a little bit with the Florida game, with how just a couple of plays could have gone a different way, and it could have resulted in a much different score, a much closer score, even there towards the end, where Florida was driving down and ended up getting stopped. But I thought, had they finished that drive, it would have been a much closer game, would have been a lot closer to where your probability rates were as well. So really interesting there with Florida. With Baylor, this is a really tough one to gauge for a lot of reasons. One, it's hard to know what happened exactly for them against Texas State. That was a really surprise. Not only did Baylor lose that game, but they lost it by quite a large margin. And you wouldn't expect that against a team like Texas State that really struggled last season. Last year, Texas State wasn't good on offense at all. They were number 80 passing in the nation. They were number 120 in rushing. So we're talking about a team that was not very good on offense. Defensively, they were a little bit better, really good against the run. Number 22 in the nation against the run, only gave up about 116 yards rushing. But the thing is, Texas State was kind of like the small Colorado as far as using the transfer portal. They weren't able to get the types of players that Colorado brought in, but they brought in 71 new players between transfers and freshmen. So that's why it's such a different team, and it's hard to know, was that just a one-time deal, or is Texas State actually a lot better this year than what they were last year? So the key things that I saw from the game against Baylor was that right side of the offensive line just kept getting worked over all game long. They're starting two new players there that had never started a game before, a redshirt freshman, Caden Siraki, and then a redshirt sophomore, Tate Williams. They both really struggled, and that's where most of that pressure came on Blake Shapen. And ultimately, Blake Shapen had to leave that game due to an MCL injury, and he won't be playing against Utah this week. So that's really big news. And having a quarterback that's going to make his first career start is a good thing for Utah. But he has shown some flashes. It's not like he was just some kind of scrub. He was actually quite good. He was the Texas Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year. His senior year of high school, he threw for over 4,500 yards, 58 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions. So he's a great pocket passer, runs a little bit. He showed that in the game against Texas State. Actually had a big run, 31-yard run, but then he had a fumble at the end. So it just brings a few more question marks for Utah in this game. As for the running game, another interesting thing is Baylor leaned heavily on a freshman last year, Richard Reese, but in this game against Texas State, they really didn't go to him much. They went to the transfer from Oklahoma State, Dominic Richardson. and they really didn't have a great game at all rushing, which is what they really relied on last season. And so to see the rushing game really struggle made me wonder, well, what happened when they face a good rush defense, seeing that Texas State last year was number 22 in the nation. So I want to share that just a minute here. Really interesting situation. Let's pull that up. Okay. There we go. So if you look at what Baylor did in 2022, they were number 17 in rushing. They averaged 205.9 yards per game. That's really good. However, when they face top teams like they did Texas State, they're way below their number, just 108 yards rushing. And this trend, it was the same back in 2022. This is not new. Iowa State was number 14 against the run. And in that game, Baylor was only able to get 123 yards rushing. Texas was number 33 against the run. And in that game, they were only able to get 101 yards rushing. And then Air Force, of course, in the Armed Forces Bowl, held Baylor to just 42 yards rushing. So what you're seeing is the resume of a lot of teams that are like Utah, who was number 22 against the run last season. This season, they're showing they may be even better, only allowing 13 yards to Florida. So what's it going to be? My guess, the interesting thing is Baylor still runs it quite a bit, even when they face these teams. The results usually not very good to them, but they continue to run. That seems to be an Aranda type of thing that he does. He sticks to the run. He knows that that's where his team generally does well, but not against these teams that are good against the run. So my guess is about 30 carries for 80 yards. And then looking at some of the full stats here from 2022, there's quite a bit that we can look at to kind of point towards another Utah game that should be similar to Florida. Utah was 10th in the nation in points scored, while Baylor was 68th in points allowed. So right there, you can already kind of see about 30 points is kind of where I'd put that in the middle for Utah to score. And then for Baylor, they were 90th in the nation in points scored. So not a great offense. Utah was pretty good at stopping the score. So I'm seeing about a 30 to 20 score when you kind of average those out. Rushing, again, we talked about that, but Utah's defense very good against the run. Passing yards, something Baylor was not good at either. So that's why they really didn't rely much on that. But against Utah, I kind of think that's what they're going to have to do. So that's what I'm seeing. I think we're going to see a lot of the same, the rush attack that we saw, and see Logan Fano, Van Fillinger, Cole Bishop lining up on that right side that's really weak and being able to take complete advantage of that right side, that young right side. So I think it's going to be really similar to what we saw against Florida. I think we're going to see a lot of sacks against Robertson. We're going to see him probably try to make as many throws as he can if the rushing game fails. And so I see this as a game that's about a 10-point, like I was saying, about 31 to 20 is what I think. So what do you think about this game? You seeing a little bit better odds than you did against Florida?
Yeah, definitely seeing considerably better odds in my model. And I think this is a game where, like where I say with the Utes, this was not an adjust my priors game for the Utes. When I was looking at Utah's play and their statistical performance against expectations, I thought that was about what I expected Utah to do. And I wouldn't say the same thing for the Baylor Bears. I think that they performed less than expected. In fact, the SP plus, which is one of the advanced metrics that goes into the sort of chicken soup that makes up my model, had that as a likely 46-point win for Baylor. I mean, they were supposed to just absolutely run the Texas State out of the stadium. They completely failed to do that. Remarkably poor performance, particularly on defense. You definitely identified a strong trend with the poor rushing performance. They made up for that with passing, but it was one of those really fast and loose games, and not a game with a tremendous amount of efficiency for them in the passing game. They had a lot of plays to get that over 400 yards passing, and and they did okay. I think they got up close to 7 yards per play, which isn't bad. But against a team like Texas State with a team like the talent that Baylor has, you would expect them to be well north of 7, maybe even north of 8 for a game like that. So definitely did cause both my personal opinion, sort of the eye test, and then also my model adjusted downwards for Baylor quite a bit. This win percentage was close to 70%. I think it was 72%. At the beginning of the year. So you're saying a significant movement in the model. I got the Utes winning this one 79% of the time, covering that line, that 7.5-point line, which I think is really, really conservative, set by Vegas there. 56% of the time. That's not quite the bet limit. You want to bet when you think you've got 60% or better chance of beating the odds. But I think if anything, the model is a little bit soft on the Utes, and probably giving Baylor too much credit for. When you watch that game, you saw some really clear deficiencies in the way that team was going to perform, and I think those are going to persist. I also noted in the model, a lot of the iterations had pretty big scoring margins. The Utes were able to blow out Baylor in my model 38% of the time, so that's anything that's more than 14-point win. So, overall, feel like this is a game that the Utes are extremely likely to win by a comfortable margin. Probably not going to blow out. More likely to be in that fat part of the graph there in the middle. But I'm going to pick a 27-17 final for the Utes, and I think it'll be a game and feel much like the Utah-Florida game that Utes fans just watched, with pretty comfortable win up until the end, and a couple defensive stands late to sort of seal the deal. The question will be if as Baylor panics and starts to throw the ball, how the Utes are going to hold up in the secondary if Baylor does happen to abandon the run at some point.
Yeah, we really didn't get to see that too much in the game against Florida. They had a few passes downfield, but with the amount of pressure that was put on Mertz, it will be really interesting watching some of the tape of Robertson. He can throw it really well down the field. He doesn't go for the deep ball, but he's very good at those intermediate routes. So, but then again, Utah's a good chance they might get some defensive players back, it sounds like, and even Cam Rising, again, the potential of returning. So a lot of other factors that could impact this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing Utes fans should be watching is this a team that has the sort of traditional Utah mold of a well-paced but unexciting offense that's gonna sort of steadily grind down a team to pair with an exceptional defense and high-performing special teams that keeps tough games, the margin close, and really dominates in less tough games. Or when we start to see some of these players come back, Keithy didn't play Brant Keithy didn't play. Still 4 receptions for tight ends, so still more than 25% of receptions went to tight ends in the game against Florida. So still a big part of the offense, but we didn't get to see Keithy's explosive playmaking ability, and of course, no Cam Rising. As I think there's a lot of credit to be given to Bryson Barnes, who had a workmanlike performance, but 18 pass attempts. I think his QBR was about 75, so above average, decent performance. Nate Johnson is electric every time he touches the ball. It's always get your popcorn ready when Nate Johnson picks up the ball, but no stellar or extraordinary performances there, and I think it's fair to say that if and when Keithy and Rising come back, the Utes offense is going to take a significant step forward, and when that happens, if that step's as big as Utah fans hope, you'll have a much more potent offense to combine with this defense that I think, to no surprise to anybody, is going to be absolutely nails wire to wire every time they take the field. Oh
yeah. Yeah, this is great. Good to have a game already in the books now and a win, and then be able to see what happens next. See what, especially with Baylor, a lot of people wondering what happened there. Were they looking ahead to Utah? It'll be fun to find out.
Yep, a lot of information to be gained. A lot to learn about these both of these football teams, and really set up to set clear expectations for the Utes. Got a little bit of a give me up next after this, I think, but then set expectations for the Utes moving forward into the conference season.
Well, thanks again. It was good to talk about this game, and thanks to the listeners.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody, and good chatting with you, Matt.